Hi, everyone, and welcome to Leave Canada Books, Using Audience-Centric Digital Marketing to Drive Global Sales webinar. I'm Rebecca Ross, Manager of Digital Publishing and International Markets, and I'll be here to facilitate the webinar. For those of you who would like to follow along on Twitter, we'll be using hashtag #DriveGlobalBookSales. The presentation should take about an hour, and we'll have lots of time at the end for questions. We'll be taking questions via the Q&A function in WebEx. Feel free to submit questions as you think of them throughout the webinar, and I'll collect them for the end at the Q&A session. At the end of the webinar, please be sure to fill out the evaluation form. Your feedback is extremely important to us and to the Canada Book Fund. And just a quick note that a PDF of the presentation will be emailed to all participants at the end of the webinar. I'm very pleased to present your hosts, Peter McCarthy and Mike Shatzkin, co-founders of the Logical Marketing Agency. The Logical Marketing Agency is a data-driven marketing agency focused on audience-centric book and author marketing. Peter and Mike bring together decades of experience in the book publishing industry with cutting-edge marketing strategy, data analysis, and consumer insights. And with that, I'll hand over the controls to Pete and Mike so we can get started.
Thanks so much, Rebecca.
Okay, Pete, you're in charge.
I'm in charge. Hi, everyone. And I wanted to say thank you to Rebecca and the folks at Leave Canada for having us and engaging us in creating the report, as well as helping us to get prepared to host this webinar and just for everything along the way. And thanks for everyone who's in attendance. It seems like a good group, and there's a bunch of you, so that makes me quite happy. So I want to jump in. Like Rebecca said, we have an hour or so, and feel free to fire questions. I think, Rebecca, will we take the questions at the end? I think so. Okay. So this is the agenda for today. I'm going to do a quick overview, a digital marketing overview. I'm going to talk a little bit about getting into the mindset of a reader, which when one is marketing digitally is really a critical thing. It kind of precedes all the technical know-how, tool know-how, data crunching know-how. Basically everything is preceded by, understanding how to think like a reader. Then how to think in terms of audiences, which is basically groups of readers, and how to find them, identify them, and how to do so quickly and efficiently, and hopefully finding new ones, not just finding the same ones over and over again, so we can find some growth. We're going to use a case study, an actual book from an actual publisher in Canada, who I believe is on the call, on the webinar. And we'll walk you through what it looks like in action, or I should say what it can look like in action. It can look like a lot of different things depending on the person doing the marketing, the book, the goals, etc. Do a little review on just a metaphor for all digital marketing to bear in mind as we're, taking this into action, taking it out and thinking about it. So that's sort of the agenda, and then we'll do, I guess, Q&A at the end, answer my own question. So jumping right in, one of the first points that, I always make, that Mike always makes, that we always make, is just that digital marketing, it's a process. It's not an event. And this is important, when I first started in marketing about 20 years ago, even digital marketing at that point was largely an event. You hosted a video online, and it was an event. You scheduled it, you promoted it, you did the video, and then you were done. Prior to that, it was a newspaper ad. Digital marketing nowadays, it's a cyclical, it's a process. It's cyclical, it's fast, it requires agile thinking. Ideally, it becomes increasingly efficient. It's repeatable, but it does require a mindset shift. The main one being a willingness to spend a little bit less time planning, a little bit more time researching, and then having the willingness to, what everyone calls start, learn, and adjust. In other words, recognizing that it's a process will actually enable one to do better digital marketing. So a lot of it is you are researching by doing. In my language, you're making a lot of smaller bets as opposed to one big bet, and you're figuring out quite quickly what's actually happening and honing in faster on the things that are working well and stopping the things that aren't working so well. It feels riskier at first. That's something that I've noted along the way. It always feels riskier at first because, who doesn't like to write a very nice plan? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this is what we're going to do. You tell the author, you tell everyone in the company or the university, this is what we're going to do, and everyone loves it. The only problem with it is it's not agile. It doesn't respond to the data that's coming back that tells you whether or not you're being successful, and it's oftentimes much less efficient and actually more time-consuming, as I hope to show you today. So it feels riskier, but my learning over a lot of years is that actually it's not riskier, and it's more efficient and more effective. But it does require some mindset changes, regardless of how big or small the organization is. I want to talk quickly about the trifecta, the things that the internet brings to us. And we use the internet advisedly. This is internet inclusive of mobile, inclusive of social, inclusive of, as we put here, content, community, and commerce. That's the trifecta. And content, the big changes over the last 15, 20 years have been, it used to be that the consumers and the professionals were A, separate, and B, the professionals had more weight online, anywhere, online, offline. It's now the case that, most of the vast majority of content is actually created by, in quotes, consumers, or let's call them non-professionals. So there are more reviews of books generally created by non-professionals, or more discussion of books by non-professionals than professionals. It's just true. Are they more influential? Sometimes. Are they easier to see? Yes. So on and so forth. So consumers plus pros equals a lot of content out there nowadays. Community. What community's done is connect all this stuff together in a way that we can actually see. So we can see the consumers who are all talking about the same things, and we can connect them together and say, okay, there's a community of people over here who are teachers, and they talk like this, and they talk about these things. They make this stuff, e.g. they make a book recommendation, and they hashtag it with something like EdChat, EDCHAT, which is a hashtag that teachers use. So now all of a sudden we're watching a bunch of teachers talking about our book, and they're basically reviewing it in 140 characters or less. We can analyze that sentiment. And it's created by users, generally for other users, and generally for other users who share certain aspects of certain interests with them for whatever reason. It could be professional interests, it could be hobbies, whatever. Demographic, they might all be parents, homeschoolers, hockey players, skiers, digital marketers, for example. Commerce, obviously massive, and this is just extraordinarily important, especially in the book world, thinking about metadata, because metadata for us is not just product attributes in terms of size, weight, and that kind of thing, but it's very specific and it's very unique to each one. So our products are books, and our books are really just containers of stories, narratives, information, those kinds of things. So we are very uniquely, anyone in the media business is very unique in the e-commerce space in how we do what we do, and I'll get a little bit more into that in a second, how we describe our products. But this just means that we have more access to consumers, and we have more access to data about them than ever before. So cutting through all that in an efficient manner is the key. How do we do that? So we look at three things. I should say I look at three things. Most people I know who I think do this well look at three things, but, what do I know? Demographics, marketers have always used demographics. Mad Men, this is the Mad Men approach, right? If anyone watches the show, females aged 34 to 50 who live in a household with $75,000 or more. They've gone to college, and they've got 2.5 kids, 1.5 dogs, and they drive a Jeep. To me, it's good baseline data. I love to have demographics. It's never hurt me to have demographics. However, demographics in the absence of the next two will kill me. It's just not enough. It's not enough for me to accurately, I would say, and efficiently market to someone. It doesn't tell me that much about who they really are, or what they really do, what they really need, and what they're really interested in. You can't know me by my demographics, I promise. It's impossible. You can begin to know me if you know my demographics and add in my behaviors. So that would be, behaviors are, in the physical world, something like travel. I'm in New York City right now, but I don't live in New York City. I took a train in. That's a behavior that I do a couple times a week. It's an important behavior to understanding who I am and how I think. Behaviors are very evident online. One of the biggest ones is search, as we'll see. Search shows a lot about what people are doing. Social shows a bit about what they're doing, but social shows a lot about the next thing, which is, to me, even more important than behavior, and when coupled with behavior is incredibly powerful. And if you add in demographics, it's very nice too, although the second two I'll take any day over the top one. Psychographics are, what do people believe in? What are their values? What opinions do they hold, either currently or sometimes, fairly fixed, if it's dogmatic? What kind of quote-unquote lifestyles do they lead? Are they vegan? So this could be, are they evangelical Christians? Are they vegan? Are they gay and is it important to them? They could be gay and it's not important to them, or it is important to them but they're quiet about it. What attitudes do they hold? Are they currently upset about something out there in the political sphere? Are they sports fans? Do they have opinions about that? These kinds of things, these underlying psychographics, can be incredibly powerful. A psychographic could be high concern with being a good parent. I mean, man, if you've got a parenting book, that is huge. High concern with getting a child into college. Incredible interest in a certain kind of novel, let's say magical realism. These kind of psychographics, that information, when coupled with behavior, you can learn a lot. Someone who's into magical realism who is currently looking for a novel, bang. Here's a few great sources of consumer data of this sort. And basically what we're showing here is just three. There's more. And ideally what one is doing is one is bumping these three against each other. Social, so Facebook and Twitter, they're really great for, like I said, the psychographic stuff. Twitter is probably, well, they're equally as good. Twitter's a little bit more useful because it's a little bit more open and it's easier to get at that information without having to pay for it, pay to reach those people. Facebook, you have to pay to play, but from my perspective, their pay to play is about as efficient a paid media as you're going to get in terms of platform. Google search is, the #1 behavioral indicator online. Online, when you look at online activities around the globe, what people do is they email each other, they search for stuff, they use social media, and they chat. those are the activities. And everything else falls away. And they watch video, and they watch video. So that's about it. I'll talk a little bit about the tools that enable one to get at the data that's here. But this is where that data is. And there's a question that I always get, which I'll just head off in advance, which is, is there a sort of self-selecting aspect to this? In other words, does Facebook skew a certain way? And so does it not matter as much for books, or does Twitter skew a certain way? The answer is, to a certain degree, sure. But you've got billions of people using Facebook, billions of people using Google, and hundreds of millions of people using Twitter. By the time you're done bumping all that data against each other, you can lop off a very small percentage of the population who may not be there, and you can understand something about how it skews in terms of the demographics, but you've got a pretty damn good representation of readership. I don't really see, it used to be, sort of a common thing to hear, well, social skews young. Bullshit. Excuse me. I'm 43. I'm the average Twitter user. Let's just put it that way. And I read a lot of books. I don't buy them, but that's another story. They're given to me. I don't pirate them either. A key thing about digital marketing and in all of this stuff about identifying audiences is, if you look at this quadrant here, core fans on the top right. These are people who will be aware of your book. In all likelihood, this is your core. If you were running, I always like to use the political analogy for this. Think political campaigns. This is your base. These are the people who are going to show up and they're going to vote left every time. You don't really need to worry too much about reaching these people. These are people who are already fans of the author. All you need to do is say the book's on sale. They're probably going to find it. Hardcore hobbyists within a niche, they're going to find it. They're pretty interesting. But as I like to say, just by walking along the trail with your eyes closed, you're probably going to trip over these people if you're doing your job anyway. And publicity will take care of a lot of this, frankly. And so will just having the book available online and off. What digital marketing really facilitates is the ability to reach an audience that I think is the most attractive one. Which are people in the bottom right quadrant. Well, we put them in the bottom. They don't live there, but we put them there. People who aren't yet aware of the book, but they just might be interested and they just might buy it if they only knew it was there. That's really hard to do in the physical world. You've got to put books next to each other that may go with each other, and very few bookstores are that clever, especially chains. And online, it's okay, but it's all transactional based, okay? So which is only one data point. It has nothing to do with psychographics. It's this person also bought. Kind of useful, not that useful. And a lot of times it's books by the same author. Those are core fans. It's not jumping into that new audience. So we're going to talk a lot about reaching that bottom right, people in that bottom right quadrant, and how to reach the core. So in terms of the use case, just say a couple words here before we jump into it. This was a book. I actually had nothing to do with choosing this book. It was given to us. It looks quite interesting. And it's a University of Alberta Press book. Came out in September. And it's the letters of a quite well-known mountain guide named Conrad Kane. Y'all can read a bit about the book there as I'm talking. A couple things that are important here. The first is I didn't read the book. I don't actually want to read the book. If I had read the book, it's not because I'm not interested. I'll read it later. But I don't need to read it to market it. I don't want to read it actually to market it because I'll know too much about Kane if I read it, and I may have the tendency to get just a little bit too cute in how I try to market it, forgetting the fact that the vast majority of the people in the world have never heard of him, they've never heard of the book, they're not looking for the book, they haven't read it, et cetera, et cetera. I need to market to people who don't know that the book exists, in addition to those who may. And that's really important. And I've found very often that reading it is harmful, more harmful than helpful. I'd rather have the editor tell me about it in about 3 minutes. That's normally about what I need to market it, and I need to read the copy that they wrote. Second thing is it's niche. It's a niche book, which is great, and I think it's great for this audience. A lot of university presses, smaller presses, said in a very kind way. I love smaller. I love smaller presses. That's where I got my start. And a lot of times they are speaking to niches. Frankly, niches are a little easier to apply digital marketing best practices to than, say, big major best-selling authors. A lot of times, PR is where you go for them. The other thing that I wanted to say here is, without having read the book, I was able to come up with what's in this marketing case, certainly in less than an afternoon's time. I'll give you some time benchmarks, but a lot of people have a tendency to think, goodness, this is going to be really hard, it's going to take a very long time, so on and so forth. I would offer it's not the case. Granted, I have a fair amount of experience, but frankly, a lot of that experience in the last several years has been at the executive level, so it hasn't been at actually running a campaign for a book. Here I was actually planning a campaign for a book. It didn't take me too long. One more thing on this. It applies equally well to fiction and nonfiction. A common misconception is that it's much easier to do this for nonfiction. I've found that it's equally easy to do for fiction and applies just as well. It's just a slightly different perspective that's required. In this case, we identified the U.S. as the export market of choice, not so much because we live here, but because it's large, it's your largest export market in general, and it's perfect for this book, which became evident early in the research. But the UK would have worked too. So just so you know. And I should mention very quickly that this is all meant to go along with the report. So I really encourage you guys to read it. This is sort of the complementary aspects of, this is meant to be complementary to the report, not substitutional. So moving on, in terms of thinking like a reader, all of this requires getting into that consumer mindset. And I talked about, they haven't read the book yet. They don't know much about it. Writing copy, creating collateral, oftentimes it requires being straightforward and clear. And it's speaking to multiple audiences at the same time. Again, think politics in a speech. You want to say clearly what it is. What is the book? And you want to say it in a way that can speak to me. I've never climbed a mountain, but I might be interested. Who is this person and why is he important? But you also want to speak to that core group of people who are into mountaineering, who do know who he is. Why is it important for them? And actually the copy here does do a fair amount of that. And we want to be looking for hooks. And we want to be thinking about how do consumers talk? What words do they use? Both consumers, who are aware of us, but also those who aren't, and how might we get them into the tent, so to speak. So here I begin my research. So I don't consider this planning. I consider it research. And it's fast, it's directional, and it's quick. So, for example, on slide 12, this is 5 minutes, tops. So I run a tool in the top right. It's called SEO Quake. And I say, what's the keyword cloud for the description that the University of Alberta has written for the book? This is just going to tell me very quickly what's important to them, presuming they know the book. Conrad Kane, mountain, Canadian mountaineering, a few other things, wandering, letters. Down in the bottom left, I quickly shoot over to library thing. Mountaineering stands out, Canadian. I look at some other related tags. I see Canadian Rockies, Kootenays, climbing jumps out at me because it's a different word than mountaineering. Skiing jumped out at me. Later I ruled it out, route guide, some various things. And I looked right away. I noticed that this gentleman, Chick Scott, had written a foreword, and I thought maybe he's a brand. I don't know who he is, but I didn't know who Conrad Kane is, so I wanted to do a little research around him and see what people thought about him. Huts jumped out also, huts as in things that one would sleep in while mountaineering or climbing, I guess. So I'm understanding what do people think about this person, Conrad Kane, the people related to the books. There wasn't much on the editor, by the way, which is why he's not there. So on this page, I'm looking at behavioral stuff. So I'm saying, okay, knowing that, when they're looking for Kane, when they're searching for him, what kinds of things are they searching? So in the top right there, I'm using a tool that's called Soovle, S-O-O-V-L-E, which is showing me what search engines prompt while I'm typing in the terms. So as I'm typing in Conrad Kane, these are some of the most popular searches, say, within Google. It will also show you Amazon, Wikipedia, and others. Those are going to be popular searches and also ones for which the search engines of choice have good, relevant result sets. So here it's quotes. That's perfect for a book of letters. Right there, I've just informed some of my creative or some of my targeting or a phrase that I might wish to include in the metadata. You know, full of some of his letters are full of some of his most famous quotes about climbing the Kootenays, for example. You know, quotes about creating the hut, which he's very well known for. I'm also looking at his Google result page on the left, which is, you know, just the front end of Google, and I'm looking for things or people who searchers for Conrad Kane also look for. These would be comps, comparable. Often it's authors. In this case, it's climbers. It might be titles. And they're real comps. They're comps as consumers who are searching on Google see as being like the thing that we're looking for. So they're not ones that we make up. They're the ones that people actually behave as if they're comparable. There they are. Comps, in this case, they're not mostly, they're not authors, they're climbers. I don't know much about the climbing world, but this is the world in terms of people who are interested in him as a climber. These are the people in his sphere. So if I was in PR, let's say, at University of Alberta Press, or even in the marketing department, and I was a little bit closer to the book, and I might have wanted to spend just a little bit more time, I might dig into a couple of these. I did. Many of them have passed away. So I wasn't exactly sure how to use these folks, but they can be useful, especially when they're authors or titles. And these might be useful too. I don't know. Understanding search in global markets, I just wanted to make a quick note here. It's not in everywhere except for China, Google is going to be your leading search engine. I think that's true. Certainly China is the one exception. There may be one other exception, possibly. But Google equals search. And that's true anywhere. The one thing that is important if you want to look at international markets and you want to look at behavior with regard to search is to log out of Google. Because Google will know who you are and where you're from. You want your search results to not be personalized. If you're trying to figure out, you know, how this book comes up in the Google search, say in Switzerland, log out or launch an incognito window if people know how to do that. There's even more deeper, complex ways to look like you're coming in from that country. Don't worry too much about it. The idea is to get a clean result set. So you can see here that in the UK, the hut, the Conrad Kane hut, is very important relative to other things. I don't know why that is. It just is. Here, if I was marketing the book in the UK, I might take a slightly different approach to the creation of the metadata, maybe focus on the hut a little bit more than quotes, although quotes comes up as a suggested search. I'm not sure, but it's a little different. That's the point. A little search data. Here I'm using Google Trends, free tool. You can Google Trends to find it. And it's going to show you relative volume over time, not absolute volume. So relative is indexed against itself or against something else if you're comparing. Here I'm just trying to see, is there any interest in this person who wrote the foreword, Chick Scott? And if so, where is that interest located? It's in the U.S., notably in Alaska. I think digging in a little closer, I found some in Colorado as well. So he's known. There is some search volume for him, so probably worth including not just as the foreword is written by him, but maybe in the descriptive copy as well, possibly in any ad copy, possibly on the back of the book, so on and so forth. Here I'm doing what I would say is one of my quote-unquote favorite tricks, which is I'm turning an advertising tool around and using it to gather data for researching. So this is Google AdWords in the middle. Google Trends, I'm noticing that mountaineering is going down. That's okay, because I go into Google AdWords, into the planner tool. All it takes, by the way, to get into Google AdWords is a credit card. They're not going to charge you unless you run an ad. So I mostly use it as a research tool. You don't have to run an ad to do research. And here I'm seeing that there's 12,000 searches for mountaineering per month on that exact phrase. The other thing that that tool will do is tell you a bunch of phrases that go with that phrase, so you can up that, 12K per month to probably something like 50K per month when you add in climbing, mountain climbing, rock climbing, backpacking, etc. I looked around into the geographic breakdown. It's kind of interesting. U.S., U.K., and New Zealand are interesting in terms of exports. That goes with more with the report. So bumping that with this, you would notice some other markets that might be of interest. None of the stuff that we've looked at so far gets into intent. So far we've been just getting a sense of the book and the author. We really want to get a sense of intent so that we can lay off things that don't matter. For example, this is not a book about training. It might be interesting to someone who's looking for mountaineering training, but certainly not as interesting to someone who's looking for mountaineering books. Maybe interested in gear, probably not. That's somebody who's going to EMS to buy boots, or the like. So we really want to be careful about intent. And being very specific with, who we're reaching out to. In other words, that's that behavioral thing. Are they looking for books? Are they looking for biographies of him? Are they looking for quotes from him? And very quickly, we can look at a lot of different things, but what we really want to do is just make sure that we don't go down rabbit holes here and start inadvertently targeting people who aren't looking for what we have. The key here is we can keep refining till the cows come home, so to speak, but at this point, without knowing anything about the book, in, I would say, less than an hour, maybe 45 minutes, I was able to get to Conrad Kane matters, Chick Scott matters, the editor, I'm sure he did a wonderful job. He has the same name as a American football player, so he's got issues in terms of SEO, and there's not a lot about him online. So simply put, he's not a brand, and I can't really use him as a hook consumer. Mountaineering is important. Books and mountaineering go together. There are other ways of talking about mountaineering, such as rock climbing, so on and so forth. There are some topical areas like clubs, mountaineering clubs. There's some regionality going on, Canadian Rockies, Kootenays, and things like that, and there are some specific things like the Hut. There are other climbers and authors who I might use as hooks. This is kind of my general, okay, here's what I know. These are the big things. I move on from that. I'm going to figure out a little bit more about the audience. Here I'm going to start to get into those psychographics. Knowing what I know, I'm going to start to try to understand who my potential audience is. I think I've got the core down, but I'm going to make sure. So first I'm going to use some Twitter data, and nobody in this sphere, with the exception of the publisher, had a Twitter account that was going to be all that helpful. Doesn't really matter because there are always hashtags. Hash mountaineering is a big one, and there are some related hashtags to that, like hash climbing, hash hiking, and I said, okay, those seem important. It's confirming that people who talk about mountaineering talk about climbing. They talk about mountains. They talk about mountain climbing. And these are the terms that these are the terms they use. This is a tool called #Scout. It's free, and it's looking at, I think, the last 24 hours of Twitter activity. So, you know, here are our people. They're online, they're on Twitter, and they're talking. I can join that conversation. I can look at that conversation. I can figure out what's going on. I can figure out who's influential around those hashtags. Here, for the first time, I'm using a for-pay tool. This is a tool called Demographics Pro. This report would not have cost very much money. I'm not a big fan of expensive tools, just for the record. So this is a one-off report. You can get a monthly subscription to Demographics Pro. I can't remember what it costs, but nothing's terribly expensive. Here, what I'm doing is I think I've got the mountaineering folks down, and I think I can create copy that's good for them. I know how to target them. I kind of know who they are. I'm interested in this hash climbing. It feels a little bit different than mountaineering. So these are people who have used the hashtag climbing with positive sentiment in the last 24 hours, and I want to see what's up with them. Women's running, yoga journal, the Lonely Planet, Times Travel, but there was a huge and meaningful overlap with National Geographic, which starts to take me into that lower right quadrant we were talking about before, which is people who may not know about the book but may be interested if they did. So I'm gonna take a quick look at them. Who are they? This is who they are, still using the same tool. And I'm looking for things that are of interest to me here. At the bottom right, I'm seeing some of the hashtags they're using again. And just this morning as I was reviewing this coming in, I saw something that was interesting, which was climate change, hash climate change. Hadn't occurred to me. It's not actually in my plan. Hash sustainability. There's that hash EdChat, so anyone, National Geographic. But the other thing I saw was that, let's see, they give a lot to charity. I can't remember where I saw that, but it's in there. They're very charitable folks. I thought to myself, climate change plus charitable equals cause marketing, which is, you know, we will give 5% of sales of this book directly to, you know, a climate change organization of your choice. That's the kind of thing that this data could inform, may or may not be of interest. Twitter tell you a lot about geographic data. So these are people who follow @ClimbingMag, which I just did a quick Google search to figure out what are influential climbing magazines in the world. Climbing Mag is one of them. It seemed to be the one. And bang, Colorado is a center of interest within the U.S. for people who like Climbing Mag. Not a big surprise, but this kind of confirms it for me. And there's a little bit on the East Coast of the U.S. as well, but really Colorado is the density. This is using a tool called FollowerWalk. FollowerWalk is a free tool. This is still using FollowerWalk. This is good times to tweet or to advertise using Twitter or to advertise using any other platform, really. And you'll see that it's Eastern time. That's morning in Colorado is the peak activity. So that's when you want to be out there using something like hash climbing or targeting with an ad people who follow @ClimbingMag. And you may only need to do it for a day when it's on sale. Use the right hashtag, use the right phrases because you already know what they are, quotes, those kind of things. A/B test it, do 2 ads, and don't spend too much, $100, $50, something like that. A little bit more about those Climbing Mag folks. Here's how they describe themselves. Now I'm starting to see other terms, rock climbing, rock climber, outdoor, climber, adventure. I'm seeing the UK pop up, so that gives me a sense of another market. But within the U.S., I'm seeing Colorado, California, Colorado, Boulder, Colorado. I'm pretty confident Colorado. Here I'm looking at, okay, if I were to take Outside Magazine, Climb Magazine, and Climbing Magazine, and I'm using FollowerWalk here, and look at all of their followers, the ones that follow all 3 of those accounts, they would seem like a very, 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 very good target audience. you can actually download the list of the @ symbols and the bios of those people using FollowerWalk. And then you can do all sorts of different things. Like you can sort them by their social authority, find the 5 most influential people there, and you could @ one of them. So you could say @Peter McCarthy. I'm not influential there, but I might be somewhere else. @Peter McCarthy, new Conrad Cain book, thought you might like to know. Want a free copy? Question mark. People don't object to that. I certainly don't when they give me 3-month free trials to digital marketing tools. Normally I say, sure, thank you for thinking of me. So taking action, once I've done all that research and I've had some of those thoughts, a lot of those were off the cuff. I can't even remember what's about to be in here, but I've done all that. Now I might tell my boss what my general plan is. Like, here's the research I've done. Here I think are the hooks. These seem to be the major markets and audiences. So, you know, all that's kind of in place. I don't really make a formal plan, although I am starting to think of some targeting methodologies that I can use and some things I can do. I might make a formal plan if I was going to do the giving to charity thing. That was just something I thought of, but I'd make a plan for that. But a lot of the execution here is still research. It's just that my marketing, I have a pretty good sense of what's going to work, but it's still research even once I'm marketing, which is slightly different. That's the process, not an event thing. So what does it look like? Here's some foundational improvements straight away. Outreach sites that are dedicated to him. There are lots of mountaineering sites out there that have Conrad Cain pages, and those sites don't all mention a book. This does not mean that anyone didn't do a great job. Those sites may have been reached out to, and they just may not have put the pages up. But a suggestion that I would make if I have been engaged to work on the book would say, target the top 10 in a Google result, send them a free copy of the book and say, hey, you know, you're all about Cain. This should be up there. Include the book on the Wikipedia page for Conrad Cain and link to the University of Alberta Press listing for the book. Wikipedia will probably be the #1 landing place for him in terms of the consumer funnel at the top. And for anyone who's interested in him, they're going to hit there. Having the book listed there is a good thing for a number of different reasons that I won't go into right now, but it's important. Complete library thing and Goodreads profiles for the book and for Cain and the editor. The reason for this is library thing and Goodreads are crawled, so it's not necessarily that it's that important from a consumer perspective, but for a roundabout way. The Google bot, which is how Google understands the internet, crawls library thing and it crawls Goodreads. In other words, it reads what's on those pages, and those are 2 very high authority sources of information for Google. They're also high authority sources of information for our friends at Amazon, as Amazon owns almost half of library thing, if not, do they own 51%? They don't own a controlling 49%, enough that they're allowed to crawl their data. In Goodreads, they own outright. So this is where Amazon gets non-transactional information about books. So fill out the profiles if you want to sell books at Amazon. If you don't fill them out. That's a joke. Well, it's not a joke. Create descriptive copy. To a lot of people, this is going to be a mountaineering book, so introducing Cain is important, using the terms that his core audience is going to know him for, but then using some of those more general ones like rock climbing that we discovered, or the Rockies, Canadian, American, using the possibly the Kootenays, and speaking in terms of all that verbiage that we figured out. Now, I'm not in any way, shape, or form advocating stuffing your copy with keywords, topics, and phrases that, are meaningless. Don't be doing gymnastics to fit these terms in. The idea is just if you were going to say something about mountaineering, again, and you've already said something about mountaineering, consider using climbing or rock climbing this time instead. I used to say one of the most powerful SEO tools in the world is the Microsoft Word thesaurus. In fact, I still use it a lot. And then one other thing is using BISACs or BICs, these are the categories, to really indicate to the online retailers and to offline retailers too, where to quote unquote shelve the book. So in this case, it's letters, which I can't remember exactly. I know there's a BISAC for that, which I think Amazon translates into autobiography, but it doesn't matter. They'll take 3, and a best practice is to use one general BISAC, one more specific one. So in this case, mountaineering, whatever the closest one to mountaineering is, and a very granular one, which might be climbers or whatever it is, people within that. In general, the idea here is to spread the book out, so to speak, get it into 2 or 3 different shelves, quote unquote. That's the idea. Within Amazon, those would be nodes. More, ride those comps, target them for paid efforts. Anyone who's following those other climbers, they may be interested in this book. Anyone who likes those other climbers on Facebook, they might be interested in this book, so on and so forth. See if it's cheap, if the ad inventory is undervalued. So, I always look for those. And consider paid efforts in this around search, because there are no paid efforts around search, certainly not for his name. So if someone does a search for Conrad Kane right now, I think they do see a book. I think Amazon is down toward the bottom of the result set, or University of I can't remember if it's University Press or Amazon that's at the bottom. But, a search campaign paid would be very inexpensive for this book and could be incredibly worth it. If someone's searching for anything that has to do with Kane, knowing that there's a book available, that's worth, 25 cents for that click. It's probably going to convert to sale. So I would suggest that in this case. Using earned media, any tweet from anywhere, identifying influencers, engage them, we talked about that. Looking at some other things from PR efforts, targeting those blogs, those magazines, so on and so forth. For an example, or as an example, of using paid media, in this case using Facebook ads. This is the Facebook ad interface, which you can get into with a credit card, same thing. You don't necessarily need to use it. You can use it for researching. Here I was actually intending on using it. And the way I was going to use it was by targeting the 22,000 people who live in Colorado and like backpacking, climbing, mountaineering, and rock climbing, and they've exhibited the behavior of buying items online. I like that target for this book. And then my creative, I'm probably going to use 3 or 4 different versions, probably one with the cover, one with a picture of Kane, and I'm going to use one that emphasizes quotes, one that emphasizes the Rockies, one that emphasizes the hut, and maybe a couple other things. And I'm certainly going to talk about the fact that this is letters, so on and so forth. I'm going to spend probably about $50 tops in my first day. I'm going to turn off all of the versions that are not getting a good click-through rate. Now, in this case, a good click-through rate would be anywhere between 0.5 and 1%, literally. So don't expect to be seeing 10% click-through rates. They're going to be lower. I'm also going to probably do 2 segments, one that's mobile only and one that's both. Just desktop. On this Thanksgiving Day, IBM and Adobe did studies. More than 50% of e-commerce traffic was coming from mobile. So I'm not going to leave it out, but I'm not going to make the assumption. So I'm going to split that, and then I'm going to split the creative within those 2. And I'm going to turn off everything literally after that first day. One day, $50. I probably won't even spend all $50 with this smaller target. I'm going to turn it off, and then I'm going to use that for any other thing that I do. So more, yeah, I mean, you can get really creative. That second part of it, understand the audience a little more deeply, that took another hour, maybe another hour and a half. Well, 20 years and then an hour and a half, but it doesn't take long to get this. 3 to 5 campaigns, and you're scaling by knowledge. And the rest of it is then creatively using it. You'll see little hashtags. You'll start to target those folks in Facebook, and all of a sudden you'll think, wait a minute, what about the people who don't live in Colorado? Because the Rockies run through 7 states. Five states and 2 provinces. I mean, the Rockies are big, and there are bookstores. When you're looking at Amazon, people in all those states are buying books. So, you can start to do things. The other thing that you're doing is you're measuring. And this is important. You're measuring and you're optimizing. And you can be watching sales. If you get sales, like daily sales, weekly sales, point of sale data, online, offline, in the country, however you get it back. You can use proxies like Sales Rank. You can use proxies like the number of reviews the book is getting on Amazon and the number of stars and how quickly that's happening. You can do the same within Goodreads. You can use other proxies, so your cost per click on those Facebook ads. What is it? Is it 20 cents? Is it 50 cents, but it's going down? And then you can use affiliate codes to track the links from the Facebook ads to the books to see whether or not at Amazon they're actually converting to sale. So if 25 cents per click and they're converting, and you've seen 100 clicks go across and you've converted, good conversion rate would be somewhere around 7%. Maybe that's great. Do that for as long as you want. I mean, if you can put $1 in and get $1.05 out, I would do that for a long time. In fact, I would offer to never stop until that stops happening, and I put $1 in and I get 99 back. That's when I'm going to stop. But to the extent that you can measure and optimize is to the extent to which you can get that data back. And a lot of times you will have to use proxies. It, of course, depends on your goals. In this case, because we're talking about export sales, we're talking about sales as the goal. You could have different goals if you were marketing an author's website, et cetera. Gut check for everyone.